Right, okay, VGI. So VGI stands for Volunteer Geographic Information, and a phrase termed by Goodchild in 2007. Basically, geospatial data collected by volunteers, not surprisingly. Two types can generally divide into data specific to a particular context or problem, and also general base map data. Has a lot in common with these other terms. Citizen science, 1995, Irwin, the general idea of getting citizens, non-experts involved in scientific investigations, data gathering and research collaboration by untrained or non-expert individuals. So bringing members of the public into the scientific process. And crowdsourcing, which is the idea of generally obtaining services, ideas, contributions from large groups of people. Things like SurveyMonkey or these various job systems whereby you can do what's it called? Mechanical Turk. That was the one I was trying to remember. Mechanical Turk, where you can put jobs up online, people bid or accept those jobs, and you can spread the jobs out over a large number of people. So a lot of VGI is citizen science in that they're collecting and involved in scientific undertakings. Also, a lot of it's crowdsourcing, as that there's quite a few citizens involved. So in citizen science, VGI, they're relatively new, dating, as I say, from roughly 1995 onwards. Some of the technologies only became available really to support this online in the mid-2000s, presumably ArcMap and the like, Google Maps and the like that. So this is a paper that was published in International Journal of Zoology, and it's the numbers of papers published in biological disciplines using citizen science. And as we can see from the start in 1995, we've got a good rate of increase of publications involving citizen science. It's a growing way of collecting data and doing science, especially in these days of austerity. We can see that what there appears to be perhaps a little drop at the end here. I suspect this is almost certainly a reporting artifact rather than any reality. I suspect the curve keeps going up. And this just represents the fact that when they collated the data for this graph, they didn't get all the journals from these years, all the papers from these journals. So it's growing in importance as a way of undertaking science in general. What are the benefits of VGI? Well, in theory, because you've got large numbers of people, if you can get large numbers of people involved, you can collect a large amount of data quickly over a large geographic area. So it's got a large potential, or a big potential, for collecting large amounts of data very cheaply, because these are volunteers. They're not costing you any money, employment, no wages, no transport costs. They're all paying their own expenses. All you've got to maintain is the infrastructure that enables them to do what they need to do. People, volunteers, local people, have access to various bits of local knowledge that perhaps experts who aren't familiar with the locality are not cognizant to. So probably the simplest example is the local names given to things like roundabouts, paths, bridges, things like this. This is the so-and-so turn right at the Crooked Billet roundabout. That may not be marked on any Ordnance Survey map, not collected by any mapping agencies, but it's the name of the pub that's on the corner of the roundabout. Everybody knows that's where you're talking about. So there's lots of local information that people hold. Clearly, one of the benefits of undertaking sort of a VGI volunteer geographical information data capture is the data that you actually collect. That's generally the reason why you do it. But I think that quite a lot of the reality, certainly for early VGI and crowdsourcing efforts, is that it's as much about the public participation as it is about the results that you actually get. It's about education and involvement, getting people involved in something, continuing their education, as well as actually developing a useful resource. I've heard some figures, so about 3 years ago now, I had one master's student who was involved in, worked for the Environment Agency and involved in various crowdsourcing efforts to try and track the ash dieback disease, which had blown over from, I think, the Dane. We were blaming the Danes on that one. And so we got the dieback of the ash trees, and the Environment Agency tried to get volunteers to report where the ash dieback was occurring so they could map it out. I think they ended up, if I remember correctly, after about a year of running a sort of reporting system, they actually ended up with about 2 records that they didn't know about in the first place after a whole year. It was that low. The quality of data returned was quite low, and the amount of data they got was very low. So for quite a bit of effort, they ended up with 2 data points. But so be warned. Sometimes the education is as important as the actual data collected. And you particularly find this with efforts that concentrate particularly on school children. For example, there was a project, I'm not sure whether it's still running, called OPAL, Open Air Laboratories, which was a general science outreach program that was run from Imperial College and other places, that tried to get school kids involved in things like surveying plants and animals and things like that in the vicinity. And I think as that, for things like OPAL, while they were hoping to capture data, real useful data, the reality was it was as much an educational program as anything else. Yes, that's a dubious. So the question is, is Google traffic where you can opt out of Google traffic, I believe, but effectively you've opted in unless you're opt out. Is that VGI, passive VGI? I don't know. Sort of is. Sort of is. Sort of isn't. I don't know. We'd have to go back to Good Child and further commentaries and have an intense debate about whether it's VGI or not. It's a type of VGI, isn't it? Maybe it's involuntary geographical information collection, because you're not actually often aware that you're doing it. Okay, so those are some of the benefits, but what are the disadvantages? Okay, clearly we need some kind of computer infrastructure that costs money, although increasingly that's relatively freely available. But certainly in the early days of VGI, the cost of creating computer infrastructures was quite high. Another problem is, or I don't know, issue, is that you've got a wide range of people. So you've got everything from novices to people who are often retired people, or retired people are involved in these data capture activities, who may have had a long professional life in, say, surveying or some other related discipline. So you've got a whole range of skill sets, from the novice to people who are actually know more than perhaps you do running the thing. Volunteers are not under your control. You can't tell them exactly what to do. You can give them advice and guidance and say, this is what we'd like to you to do, but the reality is you have no ultimate control over them like your employees. So what that means is that volunteers tend to choose where they want to go to do if you're doing spatial data collection, rather than where you perhaps need them to go. We'll see that a bit later. Not surprisingly, quality varies. You've got different people, novices to experts, people with different amounts of time, different inclinations. So we're going to get a variety of quality the quality may vary because we can't impose the standards that a national mapping agency would impose upon the people collecting data for, say, the master map. Oh, here's an example. Also, I think sometimes there are separate programs doing the same thing, so you're often kind of splitting the effort. So, for example, when we were these studies for trying to identify where the ash dieback disease was, both the open air laboratories, the OPAL project, and a separate little project called AshTag were both collecting data on AshTag buyback. So there was competition among systems for people to get involved and use and submit their data. I'm not going to watch that video, but it's a nice example. It's a few years old now. If you're feeling like 5 minutes of watching a vid sometime later tonight or something, have a look at that. It's a nice example of using volunteer geographic information or participatory collecting data in an Amazonian tribe to demonstrate their usage of the forest, their historical connection with the forest, and therefore to establish sort of an argument for land rights, etc., etc. This is the area that's been logged, and this is the remaining relic forest that's occupied by the indigenous Indians. I'm not going to go into that, but do have a look at that. But what I am going to tell you about is what we're potentially going to do next week, or some of the stuff that we're going to do next week, those of you who come to our exciting, wonderful day about the Hogs Mill. So the Hogs Mill, as you probably know, is the river that runs from here, from Kingston, empties into the Thames just behind the Kingstone, under the Clapham Bridge, runs through the Knights Park campus, up here to Chessington, and the sources are various chalk springs in Ewell and Epsom. Why is there no river in this part of the catchment? Well, it's chalk. It's a chalk stream. The chalk is highly permeable, so that the river, the water flows into the rock, goes into the groundwater, comes out of the springs. So this is a mostly urban river, as you can see. It's mostly in the urban environment, and it's managed by, the overall management of the river is by the Southeast Rivers Trust, the Hogs Mill River Partnership, under the auspices of the Southeast Rivers Trust. This is the river along which some of the not new romantics, what am I talking about? They post-Raphaelites, pre-Raphaelites, painted various paintings, including the famous Ophelia, painting of Ophelia in the river. Okay, so from 150 years ago, it was this pristine, beautiful stream in which the pre-Raphaelite painters painted their romantic pictures. Today, it's a bit more like this. It's a bit more toilet paper and sanitary pad. But there you go. Okay, so what we're trying to do is to characterize so the volunteers of the Rivers Trust monitor the river on a weekly basis. They walk up and down the river and they try and identify where pollution has occurred, pollution events have occurred. They do kick sampling invertebrates to monitor the overall health of the river in various locations. They also look out for outfall pipes and what's coming out of the outfall pipes. You see soap suds coming out, you see bits of toilet tissue and things like that hanging off the grills and things like that. You get lots of algal mats in the river indicating eutrophication, high nutrient enrichment in the river, all indications of pollutants. So what we're interested in is mapping the information that we have on the invertebrate health of the river, the indicator species indicating the health of the river, the water quality sampling that's been done on the river by the university and also by the Environment Agency, so the concentration of dissolved oxygen, nitrates in the water, that kind of thing, and also where these outfall pipes are and what their condition is through time. Why is this a particular problem? So just before Christmas, volunteers and various members of the River Partnership walk the river and maps all the outfall pipes along the river and assess their condition. So one of the things that we want to do next Wednesday is to put together the water quality data, the biological indicator sampling data, and the outfall pipe survey onto an online map, and build a reporting system so that the volunteers can fill in a form and report a pollution incident along the river and publish it onto the map. That's one of the things that we're going to try and do next week. Where's this pollution coming from? Quite a lot of this pollution. Okay, some of it's due to people emptying the oil out the sump of their car in their drive. Some of it is due to sort of washing industrial equipment in industrial estates outside of industrial units. But quite a lot of it comes from misconnections of the sewage network or the domestic appliances to the wastewater system. So in the UK, and generally, all dirty water should go into the wastewater system, into the sewers, to the sewage works to be treated. So showers, toilets, bathrooms, washing machines should all go into the sewage system to the sewage works. The reality is that quite a lot of domestic appliances in particular, but also industrial units as well, have been plugged in incorrectly to the surface drainage system, which goes into the local rivers rather than into the sewage system. So this is the system that's meant to take the clean runoff from the gutters, from surface water, and it goes straight into the river. But if you plug in your washing machine, or even worse, your toilet, into the surface water system by accident, then you're putting potentially dirty soap suds down, suddy water down here. But if we get a toilet in, we're actually putting human excrement and waste into the river, which just has a health as well as a general pollution problem. So this is one of the sources, or one of the big sources, of pollutants into urban rivers, is this misconnection of domestic appliances. But it's very difficult to know whether somebody in their house has plumbed something in incorrectly. You can't go and look at the house and say that's an incorrect plumbing. So it's difficult to find these. So there is an ongoing program run by the water authorities to identify properties that are misconnected and to correctly connect them. It's a legal requirement for people to correctly connect their devices to the dirty water sewage system. So this is run by the local water supply company, in this case Thames Water, and basically by looking at the outfall pipes, the state of the outfall pipes, we can identify the pipes that are going into the river that have the worst effluent going into the river, seem to be the worst. And then if we track those pipes up to their catchment area, the properties that are the streets and the roads that have been drained by those pipes, you can then knock door to door on the properties in that area to identify householders who have got miscorrected appliances. So that's the approach. The approach is to go from the river up, work your way back up to the houses. So they've got an ongoing program across London, and I believe it's going to take them about 20 years to complete the rolling program of trying to get all of these properties correctly connected. So one of the purposes of this survey, one of the main purposes, is to identify these outfalls with particularly bad problems, and therefore then that will feed into Thames' program for which areas it's going to target, because it can only target so many per year, to actually go around and correct these inputs. So that's the background behind it. As you can see, that's a relatively clean outfall despite all this fungal mat. Here, this is a bad indication. This is toilet tissue and things like this. So this is an indication that probably somebody's attached a toilet somewhere up that outflow. Right. Okay, let's not worry about that. That's the details of the present correction systems on the Hogs Mill, and I suspect my house will be knocked on in the non-too-distant future to check that my appliances are correctly attached to the river. Okay, so the survey, the outfall survey, was run jointly by, well, it was run by the Hogs Mill Partnership, and the Hogs Mill Partnership works very closely with the Zoological Society in London, because the Zoological Society in London run the citizen science biological indicator monitoring on the river. So they're running the kick sampling and coordinating the kick sampling and other biological survey work is done on the river. And as a result, they partner with the Hogs Mill Partnership over the outfall survey. So these are slides by some of these I've stolen from Joe Pecorelli, who may be here next week. I'm not sure whether he's going to be here next week. You can go and talk, he's talking here to the he's talking to the Kingston Biodiversity Network here in the university on the Wednesday evening and the evening before about other things, I think. But anyway, so this was a citizen science project. So involved, the aim was to systematically expect, record, and map the outfalls on the river. This had to be done during a dry weather period, so we had to wait for at least, I think, 1 week beforehand with no significant rain. There were two reasons for this. One is that high river flows wash away the evidence of the sewage coming out the outfall, so it can reduce the amount of fungal mat, which can get washed away. It will also potentially wash away the tissue and other physical indications that you've got a polluting outfall. So it had to be done on the correct day and or on dry conditions. The other reason for doing it is so that they're comparable between outfalls. If you've got a flash flood or something, maybe it went through part of the river, maybe therefore you've got some of your records with high water levels, some with low levels, and maybe they're not comparable as a result. We used a app-based data capture program. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what it was called, something plus. I think it's probably on the next slide. So they walked the river, identifying the outfalls, used an app to collect those outfalls, uploaded it to a cloud-based data capture system, VGI system. EpiCollect, that was the name of the app that we used, EpiCollect. So a form was created on the EpiCollect system. EpiCollect is hosted by Imperial College in London. I'm not sure a great deal about its history. It's basically a VGI type app that anybody can use. It allows you to generate a form to collect the information. So this is the form they used: the volunteer name, survey, the GPS location, photo, some description of the catchment, description of nearest landmark, how many outfalls, etc., etc. So this form was built in EpiCollect. Then when you got to a site with an outfall pipe, you would take a photograph, fill in the form, and then upload it to the server. It's important to note that this form is based on Thames Water's standard assessment method. So they standardized the form so it would, because we're feeding into Thames Water's applications for national funding for the government to undertake these works to identify these misconnected appliances. What happens is based on this standard method of assessment, the Environment Agency has devised a scoring system which takes these values and creates an impact score for each outfall, and that's what's used to as evidence that the outfall needs attention. So standardization of your data collection. This is the form. This is what we want to implement, perhaps in the collector app for ASRI, to be able to instantly upload the data to an ASRI online map to show where we've got these incidents. So the survey went between the 1st of October and the 4th of November. 26 people took part, 24 volunteers, 1 Environment Agency staff and 1 ZLSL staff. Here's some of them on the river, looking at an outfall. You might recognize this guy. He's one of the third-year students in environmental science here. 25 kilometers of river was surveyed, 6.5, or well, 5.5 was a riverbank survey. There was also 6.5 kilometers which had to be done through in-channel survey with the correct safety equipment. There's a combination of accessibility. There's parts of the river where it's privately owned on both sides, and they had to get permission to access the river at long parts of those. There are also parts of the river which are deep, and therefore people require the correct safety equipment to do it. This is an example of the data that's collected. They identified 288 outfalls, of which 23% showed signs of pollution. So roughly one in 4 outfalls had a pollution incident. 22 of those outfalls had a score greater than 8 and were immediately reported to the Environment Agency as hazardous polluting incidents. And together these were collated and sent to Thames Water for their further submission for government funding to address these. Yeah, some general statements. Right, okay. So it was undertaken by volunteers, volunteer partnership with various organisations. Okay, so part of what the Rivers Forum or the Rivers Partnership also wants to do, so it undertook the river survey, that's part of the work that it's doing, is it's developing a strategic plan for managing the river. And as part of the strategic plan is we need to establish a baseline set of information for the Hogs Mill River. And here's identify priorities for intervention, create a map of the river, priorities containing sorts of prioritised lists of habitat restoration maintenance that's required. And this would allow us the partnership not only to manage the restoration and the management of the river, but also, or as more importantly sometimes, is to prepare bids for more funding to get the money to do the work that needs doing. Objective for this strategic plan, understand the whole creation, review of existing data, geodatabase of information. And this is to a certain extent what's stimulating some of what we're doing next week, is to start thinking about how we create a geodatabase, a mapped portal onto this various information on the river. Okay, OpenStreetMap. Ooh, running out of time as usual. Right, okay, OpenStreetMap. So OpenStreetMap is a volunteer geographical information project. It's probably, if not, almost certainly the largest in the world. And basically, it's the attempt to make a street-level base map for the entire world. Why do we need it? Well, mapping base maps, street-level maps are expensive to buy off national mapping agencies. Now, I don't know what it is nowadays, but 20 years ago when I worked for 25 years ago probably now, when I worked for the Water Department in Edinburgh, I seem to remember somebody once telling me that if you wanted to buy master map for the whole UK, then you were talking about over £1 million. Yeah, it might well be cheaper now than it was then, because then you are paying higher prices for the data capture process in the first place. But it's an awful lot of money, basically, if you want the whole large areas at street level from national mapping agencies. Also, they tend to be quite slow to update because they're very rigorous in their approach to data capture, and because of the system whereby they do it. I believe they they record how many changes there are in a map tile, and when they hit a certain threshold, then they release a new map tile. So if not, you were in an area where not much changes, you might not get a new tile released for quite a long time. So there's a delay in getting data out from national mapping agencies. But, oh yeah, there are also problems with national mapping agencies. There are problems in coverage and quality, frankly, with various national mapping agencies. So, for example, if you want US streets, you go to the US Census Bureau Tiger data set, And that only contains road centre lines. They're not as polygons, you've got no curved lines or anything like that. It's just street centre lines. OS Master Map has limited street furniture, something you might have observed in your comparison there. And certain geographical areas just simply don't have data. Remember the pre-Haiti Port-au-Prince maps that I showed in a previous lecture, pre-earthquake and post-earthquake. So that's the need for OpenStreetMap, comes under an Open Commons license, so it's completely open source. How is OSM collected? Variety of sources that are not copyright, importantly. GPS tracks, wander out with your GPS along the road, capture the road. Out-of-date copyright maps, out-of-copyright maps, old maps, which still show the same streets. Yahoo provided a whole load of aerial imagery. And one of the important things to note, these things are all at different scales. So it's the data that's captured comes from a heterogeneous set of methods. There's no one method for collecting the data. This is rather out of date. I could do with some more up-to-date things. So the community, there were, in 2008, there were greater than 50,000 people registered on OpenStreetMap as contributors. Probably a lot more nowadays. They held, while people do individually and in groups, local groups, undertake local mapping projects, they also run what they call mapping parties, where a large number of people will come together for a day or a couple of days, either to thrash through and maybe do a particular area or collect a particular set of data for a particular area, but also to indoctrinate, to introduce new people to the OpenStreetMap culture, the way of doing things, effectively training people up in an informal fashion. Infrastructure servers, it started off at UCL, University College London, and there's also various commercial companies that provide server things. So, I think we'll just do this and then I'll maybe finish the lecture off really quickly up in the practical if we want to do that. So OpenStreetMap. So what differences did you spot between OpenStreetMap and MasterMap? Let's just do this and then we'll go. What differences did you see? Where? Okay, we've got whole great holes that don't have buildings in the OpenStreetMap. Anything else?
Footpaths.
What about footpaths?
The amount of footpaths in MasterMap than in OpenStreetMap.
Sorry,
The amount to note in OS MasterMap.
where?
It's that long on either side of the road.
Oh, you mean, right, you said footpaths. Okay, yeah, curb lines. I was thinking footpaths through the countryside or whatever. Right, yeah. Yes, you've got curb marks. We don't have curb lines here. Yep. Which one's right? Yeah, it is a Korean church. This is an example, I think, of the OpenStreetMap being more up to date than the master map. I think it was built as a Presbyterian church and has now become, because if you walk down there, there's a little sign that says Korean church up there. But there is another alternative here, and that is just that they keep the convention, because it was built as a Presbyterian church. They keep calling it a Presbyterian church, even though it's not a Presbyterian church. So what are the rules for naming buildings that the Ordnance Survey use? Do they refer it to the user, or do they refer it to the sort of name of the building? Yep. Okay, what other differences have we got? Okay, so yes, we've got different differentiation between the Crown Court and Bitton's multi-storey car park. They're one building on OpenStreetMap, more than one building on... why do you think that might be? that might well be the reason, yeah. The Ordnance Survey care more, probably. Simple as that. If they know that they're physically different buildings, they'll separate them. Whereas, as you say, the person who's done that maybe was looking from above. Maybe they simply didn't recognise it as a physically different buildings because they are physically connected to each other in some form or fashion. Right?
OpenStreetMap is seems more helpful for navigation.
You've got your directions there. Anything else that might make it useful for driving?
The roundabout itself is clearer in OpenStreetMap.
Traffic lights on OpenStreetMap, they're on Master Map.
Is that traffic lights?
Yeah,
That's the
traffic lights,
pedestrian
yeah.
crossings. This is an example of local knowledge or street furniture that may be captured by volunteers that's not captured by the Ordnance Survey.
We've got cycle lanes, we haven't on street map.
Okay, so we've got cycle.
Yeah, they
Cycle.
have at the top of Denmark Road there.
Denmark Road.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, that little cut through, yeah.
Down the corner there, that's
Yeah.
marked as a cycle path, but it's not on OpenStreetMap.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got some more detail. Well, this is not surprising because if we think probably master map is 1 to 1250 collection or 1 to 2500, probably 1 to 1250 here. OpenStreetMap, who knows what scale it is, but ostensibly it's about 1 in 10,000. So, any other differences? So, yes, well, not all of them do. Some of them do. Yeah, they're generally end ones. They do have the house numbers. These don't. This tends to be a bit more, yes. There's inconsistency, I would say. Priory Court, Denmark Road. Well, that's here. So here we've got houses, names and numbers. And over there, it's sometimes you get names, sometimes you get numbers. Yeah. Anything else? Right, so that's the edge of the highway, yeah. Yeah, okay, so there's more detail over that, yeah. Okay, so I think we can accept that there's more detail on the Ordnance Survey master map, but is there any other sort of categorical differences between them that we can see? Do they agree what a road is? No. So you can't even agree what a road is exactly, yeah. So the particular one I notice is the car park behind the Crown Court, which is clearly marked out as a sort of area of tarmac, but here is marked as a road appearing to go round some sort of green park. I am not aware of there being a green car park area of green space in that car park personally. There's that. Also, if we look at water splash, no other roads, the missing roads, I can't remember, I thought there was a missing road. There's certainly a difference. No, that's a passageway. Yeah, there's road business or differences potentially between roads there. Great. Okay, so a number of differences. Here's another one. Local information, what's in the shops, what type of shops have we got? Ordnance Survey doesn't bother with anything like that. Penryn Road University bus stops, again, street furniture. So quite a few differences. Okay,